And so you want to start with that, just knowing that even if you're a person who invests heavily before you jump, like I'm a person that I had lots of training coming into it, right? But I didn't decide to stop and go get that training and then be a coach.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today, we're talking to Todd Randall of Beach View Coaching. He's a serial small business entrepreneur. So we're excited to talk to him about tips and tricks on starting our own businesses. How are you doing today, Todd?
Thanks for having me, Ken. I'm great. Thanks. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you for joining us. So today you have Beach View Coaching, but you've had multiple entrepreneur adventures or business owner adventures. How many companies are you currently up and running under your umbrella?
Yeah, I operate 4 companies now. There gets to be a point, of course, where it gets to be cumbersome if you really want the lifestyle that I do. But 4 is a healthy number. If I have good general managers and I have projects that I'm interested in, I can have impact on 3 or 4, companies at one time and not feel overwhelmed or burdened.
Awesome. So before we go into Beach View and what it is that you can do to help small, medium-sized businesses today, can you give us a little bit of background, like where you grew up and kind of what makes you that desire to be a business owner?
Sure. So I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, very small, rural farm town. And I always aspired to be sophisticated. I wanted to live outside the, tight constrictions that my small farm town restricted me to as a kid. And so I went to college and I got a fancy degree and I moved to a big city. And it was all fine and good, but I got caught up into this kind of corporate lifestyle that people complain about in their 30s and 40s, right? Because it was a bit smothering. And so my dream to be my own business owner didn't start until late. And I think it's one of the things that makes my coaching practice interesting because people have come to me and said, I'm not really an entrepreneur, but I'd like to start a business. And I'm like, whoa, step back. That expression is in conflict with itself. If you want to start a business, you are an entrepreneur. And there are a wide variety of entrepreneur opportunities. You don't have to be Elon Musk to be an entrepreneur. That's not what every entrepreneur looks like. And so that's maybe what makes my story interesting is that I was a late bloomer and decided that I wanted more flexibility. Like I was good at the jobs that I did. And I was staying late to make things organized and neat and beautiful. And I wanted customers to be happy, but I was working 30, 40% harder, than all the folks around me. And the question I kept asking myself is, can I get some return on that? Like if I'm this valuable, does it provide extra income or does it provide extra liberty for me? And that's what drove me down the path.
Okay, so you had to leave corporate America, or you had to experience corporate America to understand that this is not for me. And I agree. I hated my time in corporate America, and it was very short lived. I mean, it was a year in my early 20s that I spent some time there, and
different strokes
I knew
for different
instantly not for me.
Yeah. And I loved it. And I was in it for a long time. So in both cases, we both decided because of our corporate experience that we wanted to be entrepreneurs, but it doesn't need to be someone who didn't disliked it right away. And it doesn't need to be somebody who stayed in it long enough to get all the skills they need. There's lots of space in the middle for someone who's been in it for a little while and said, okay, I've learned some things now. I think that I can apply them in a way that makes me happier now that I'm 27 or now that I'm 34 or now that I'm 50. I think there's lots of room for entrepreneurs here. We tend to block people out or box people out, I think is the expression, that you haven't been in it long enough or you've been in it too long or whatever. But I think there are all kinds of flavors.
Right. Are all business owners entrepreneurs?
Yeah, absolutely they are. And I think the entrepreneur, the definition of entrepreneur for me is someone who's willing to step up and take the risk for it.
Right. So even a generational business owner, right? The dad started the business. He hands it over to the son or the daughter in this case, in any case.
Yeah.
That the offspring, son or daughter, is going to have significant risk involved in owning the business.
If you can lose it all, you're an entrepreneur, regardless of how it came about. Even if you inherited it, if you can lose it all, because you could take a safe play, right? You could give it to your little brother or little sister and put some money into account and live off 4% T-bonds, right?
Or go get a job.
Or go get a job. Sure.
Yeah. So all business owners are entrepreneurs. They're taking a significant risk to do their business.
Agreed.
Whereas, and I would say, they're risking their money, right? And if you're working in corporate America, then you're risking your time and your happiness, which is, in my opinion, way more valuable than the money that I'm going to probably lose anyway if I don't start a business with it.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a way that is classically defined, but you and I just set the new standard today. Anybody that can lose their shirt is an entrepreneur, period.
Absolutely.
We've established a new definition.
Yeah. I think the definition is significant risk.
Okay.
Right. Person that takes a significant risk or a risk with their money to start or maintain a business. So I always struggle with, I don't like being called an entrepreneur. I'd much rather be called a business owner.
Really?
Yes. And I don't know why. It's something in my head subconsciously that I don't feel like I've done enough businesses to be called an entrepreneur, or I'm not at enough risk. I don't know. It's crazy, right? But I'm definitely in the position that I can lose it all in half.
Yeah.
So it's a weird mindset thing. So I find it interesting that you have other people coming to you and having that conversation, entrepreneur versus business owner.
I'm not really an entrepreneur, but I want to open a business, and I do think they're the same. The risks are significant in any case.
Okay, so you have done bootstrap companies, self-started, franchise model.
Franchise.
Do you have one that you like better than the next?
My favorite now is the acquisition, but I think that's a time of experience. I'm not sure that when I was 35 or 40, when I got into my first business, if buying somebody else's problems was a good way for me to get started. But it's the way that I prefer now, because there's something already proven in the market, right? There's some value to the customer. There's either a major customer or a major vendor that you've already established and gotten some of the groundwork out from underneath you. That's the biggest thing for an entrepreneur, is getting from conception, like in your mind, to your first dollars. That road can be years sometimes. And sadly, many young entrepreneurs don't fully appreciate the amount of time or the amount of patience it can or should take to get there. And so acquiring a business is a way to shortcut that process if you want. Save up a little bit of money, buy somebody that's already proven that the model works, and now you're the grinder. Grind away. Do whatever they did that worked and do it over and over again, all the while trying to innovate and come up with some new ideas about how to make it better, right?
Right. I have purchased an existing business and then stepped in as the new operator. I very much enjoy that.
Yeah.
What I like more, and I do this pretty regularly for our hosting business, is that we acquire for growth. And then you're looking for very similar things that you can cut the HR department, accounting department out of, and then just take the clients out of those businesses. I think acquisition for growth is a home run, and acquisition to get started, I think, it lowers the risk, right? If you can buy the company that already has clients, then you already have revenue on day one.
This is a fundamental difference between an entrepreneur and somebody who works even in a very difficult, risky job, because there are jobs out there that are very risky, like full commission sales, et cetera. But one of the fundamental differences of an entrepreneur is that, and you don't realize it until you get on board, is that one of your first and primary tasks is to mitigate risk.
Yes.
Not a term you have to deal with a lot as an employee for anybody else, but you have to mitigate risk, because at any given time, a shark can come and eat you in the middle of the night. And if you're not thinking about that, then you're not. Then you're really not an entrepreneur, because it is a real risk in business. And that's why the self-starter model can be fabulous for a young entrepreneur, because they can walk into a business with lots of questions. And some of the key questions, in fact, may be answered for you, which is great, because it just limits the number of things that you have to worry about. I spend a lot of time as an entrepreneur trying to take the 100 things in my head and reduce them to 10 somehow. And I do that with delegation. I do that with risk mitigation. I do it with simplifying my life. I do it with overstaffing. I tend to staff more than other companies do. In all those ways, I take 100 things in my head and I reduce it to 10. That's part of my goal every day.
Okay. So mitigating risk, getting to all your tasks down to small, manageable things, right?
Indeed.
I think that's great. If if I'm out there and I want to start a business, and you said that you own some gyms and some salons and things like that, and I think those are very great first businesses if you're going to go into brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that complicated of a business. You've got a couple of departments, not like a yoga studio. A yoga studio isn't that complex of a business to operate.
I love when I see people go into do businesses like this for a couple of reasons. One is that people generally lean towards a business that they have a personal interest in. So for me, I've been an athlete my whole life, and for me to open a gym is something that's interesting and fun for me. I tended to identify with my customers. I tended to identify with my staff, and so that kind of checks that box. The other reason is because these businesses have been proven a couple thousand times over. And so if you are exercising reasonable judgment, if you put the time in, right, there's a reasonable opportunity to succeed. And one of the reasons that I started there, I started with spas because it was the closest thing to healthcare that I could find that matched my passions, right? So I went to a spa. We did mostly massage, some skincare. And for me, when I walked in there, I was looking for a modest return with a modest amount of risk that comes with it.
Yes.
Okay? And that's not what everyone's looking for business, but for me, that totally worked. And I love it for young entrepreneurs because they can walk into something and make a handful of mistakes and still have time to salvage it, because 1,000 people have done it before you. If nothing else, you can call 1,000 people. Call 1,000 people and ask them how they solved it, and you'll have all kinds of ideas.
Absolutely. I like it a lot. It's a great starting business. You can bootstrap it. You can buy an existing establishment, right?
Both work. In that situation,
way.
Both work. Yeah.
I think rent and payroll are your big ones, but if you're going to own and operate, then you can be the head trainer, you can be the head coach or the office manager. You can fill one of those roles. And now
I've seen it over and over again. You have a black belt studio with someone who's an actual black belt, and it makes a lot of sense because it saves on staffing right away, or a shooting range where someone's an expert firearms operator. So I highly recommend them for someone to get started. Just remember that there are many of those for a reason, because they are hobby jobs, right? It's pretty hard to be a billionaire in those businesses if that's one of your goals. It's actually pretty hard to scale in some of those businesses, right? But many people, a modest opportunity for return and coming with a modest modicum of risk, those are great places to get started.
So those kind of businesses, if they're profiting $60,000 to $250,000 a year, typical suburban brick and mortar, boutique fitness, boutique studio kind of place, right? So to make any kind of real money, you have to have multiples of those, right?
Yep.
And I see all the time, regularly, somebody's trying to sell their gym, they're trying to sell their business, and they're an employee there. And they're taking their employee salary out of the EBITDA number, right? So it's kind of a fake number. And this happens, I see it all the time. And I scratch my head. I'm like, well, that's not true. That your pay was not distributions. It was manager pay, or it was trainer pay, or something along those lines. And that role needs to stay there.
Right.
And you are an expert in delegation. And that's what's required to get to the 3 and 4 studios. It's required to get yourself out of the business so that it is an asset that you can have a liquidation event at some point.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to these business owners on getting, it's hard for them to let go? I've been in this boat myself, right? It's really hard to let go of those reins and trust other people to, at the end of the day, be your babysitter, right? This is your baby, and you're letting somebody else watch it.
You brought up a really good point, which I think all young entrepreneurs should consider. And that is, once you get into your first business, the task can be really fun because there's a certain amount of pride that comes with it. Hey, I'm the business owner. I'm taking out the garbage because it's my business and my garbage. And there's something very cool about that, of meeting your neighbors and saying, I'm the business owner. And that's all fine and good until you realize you've bought yourself a job. You paid a lot of money to get into this, and now you're paying yourself as an employee in your business. Now, if you enjoy your business enough, that may be enough for you. You could run a laundromat for the rest of your life, or you could run a shooting range for the rest of your life, and that's all fine and good. For scale, right? There is a whole process that you need to be accustomed to step away from the business. The question is it still profitable? If you're outside of the business and operating it as a as a strategist, right? As a financier. And there are some steps to get to there. And to do that, you must learn to delegate. You must learn to delegate well. I had my first business. I was in it by about a year, and I realized that I was working just as many hours, and I had just as many stresses and anxieties as I did when I was in a corporate environment. And it was a big revelation for me. It really shook me up. I thought, what have I done? I've just bought myself a job. And I had a manager at the time that I hired, and I'd worked with her for the whole year. And she was pretty strong with me to tell me that she could take on more responsibility if I would just trust her to do it. From my perspective, there were 100 things that only the owner could possibly do in my business. I think a lot of owners struggle with this. I'm the only person that could possibly make that decision because I'm the one liable for the results if they don't. But what you're not calculating is that if you teach somebody to make that decision and they make a mistake, the difference between the choice they made and the choice you made is not the entire number, it's some delta, right? And if you do that across 10 or 12 or 20 tasks, you may be able to step out and buy another location. You may be able to step out and introduce a new service line into that business. You may be able to step out and negotiate with a landlord or buy a piece of real estate and move into it. And those are things that can have a 3, 4, 5x impact on the profitability of your business that you weren't doing because you were the only person who could negotiate professional liability insurance. Right? You were the only person that could handle that tough customer. You were the only person that could do this. But in fact, with trust and delegation, there are many people that can make B or B plus decisions in those departments, and then coach them, teach them. Next year, they'll make better decisions, A minuses and A decisions, while you're out doing stuff that has a bigger impact on the business.
Absolutely. My wife is learning these things right now, and it's fun to watch her, struggle through. It's a fun struggle, right? But it's fun to watch her come to these realizations and help her through this process.
What kind of business is that?
We own a boxing school. And she operates it, Monday through Friday. And my role is finance, right? So I deal with the finances for the place, and which is super simple. And, I'm support if they need me, right? So, but she runs the Monday through Friday 9 to 5, and we're trying to get her to move to more of an entrepreneur role instead of the general manager.
Yeah. The trouble with trying to step away from the GM spot is if you're in the GM and you're killing it, you're doing really well at that. If your lead salesperson, moves away to Colorado or has a healthcare concern or gets, recruited to the military, like you end up you have to do your job and you also take over their task temporarily,
right?
In order to have excellent customer service, et cetera. And now you've just doubled your workload. Whereas if you are able to step out of the business just a bit, right, and hire and train people to do some of the GM role, you don't have to replace all of yourself in the beginning. This is one of the key things that we learned the hard way is you don't have to replace every task that you do to start. You can replace some of them to make your job less stressful so that when you have a project, you can step out of the box, work on your project, and then monitor and audit the tasks that you have delegated.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you love doing this work, right? It's not about the money so much as she loves training, right? She loves doing it. So I'm like, if you really love doing it, then do it. It's okay. But make sure that you're not doing it so much that you can't step away and do other stuff if you need to, right?
There are times that a business really requires, there are times that a business really requires ownership. And if you're not prepared for it before it hits, like COVID, right?
Right.
And it really requires leadership. It requires, communicating with local community partners and politicians and healthcare folks and landlords, et cetera. And unless you have prepared the business in such a way that you can step out and take on those important projects, then you're doing your business a disservice. And so that's another way of looking at it. I had a series of small businesses in San Diego at one time, and California has an environment that allows for class action lawsuits easily.
Okay.
And a business like mine had a successful result. A lawyer went in, filed a class action lawsuit, and they made a boatload of money from that company. And so they filed one with me, not knowing anything about my business. They just figured, what the heck? I was embroiled in a class action lawsuit and all the documentation and communication that involved that and all the expenses of that for 6 or 8 months. And it was my primary job for those 6 to 8 months was to manage my risk for a lawsuit that could cost me $1 million.
Yes.
Right. And that's one of the things you need to be prepared for by delegating and creating a staff that can step in for some of your tasks, not all of them.
Yeah. Winning a lawsuit is like winning an earthquake.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
You're going to take damage no matter what. If you're in it, you're going to take damage. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. It's going to be bad. And as a business owners, at some point, you're going to find yourself in court or some kind of dispute across the board. And that takes an obscene amount of time out of your day, right? Yeah. It's literally, it becomes a full-time job. I'm assuming if you had a class action lawsuit, that was almost a full-time job for you. 25
or 30 hours a week for sure. Think about entrepreneurs that you know that have been in business for 50 or 60 or 70 years. How much cash do they keep on hand? Way more than young entrepreneurs. And the only reason that they keep way more is because they've been through down times and they realize that every once in a while, emergencies do happen. And as a young entrepreneur, it's easy to think of yourself as a sprinter who's getting to the next 100-meter line. And you do have to mix that with a healthy dose of, I'm also a marathoner who's running 26 miles. And at the end of those 100 meters, I can't stop and take a break because that may be the time that the alligators are coming out of the river.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And that's the risk mitigation thing that I was talking about by being an entrepreneur.
So you said that you were a little bit older when you started your first company, when you exited corporate America. Mm-hmm. Was that late 20s, late 30s?
No, I didn't open my first business until almost 40.
Almost 40. Okay.
Yeah, so I've been in it about 14 years.
We're living in, I think, probably the coolest time in existence, right? Like, especially for business owners, small business owners, bootstrapping. All of these businesses today are, a lot of business today is achievable for anybody, right? The barrier to entry to start a company is a few $100, right? Actually, we're going to come out with a series where I just partnered with Prime, and we're giving away the legal fees for starting an LLC, right? So if anybody needs an LLC, and we're going to be creating a series here soon for that. Mm-hmm. And you started being an entrepreneur at the age of 40, and I think that that's going to be more and more common over the next 10, 20, 30 years, right? If not just the new norm.
I'm not sure that 40-year-olds have a better chance of being billionaires than 20-year-olds that start a business, because sometimes 20-year-olds have an inherent advantage to innovation, right? The difference is that 40-year-olds are more likely to achieve success with their first business because they have some experience to bring to the table, as long as you are being judicial in what you target, right?
Okay.
So if you're a baseball fan and you spent most of your life in baseball, pick something baseball related or pick something sports related. Find something that ties into the experience that you had as a professional, and it raises your statistical rate of succeeding by an order of magnitude.
Right. Absolutely. And we're going to see more of these, I think, I hope.
Yeah.
What do you tell the family person, husband, wife, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That has the corporate America job, has the support of their spouse, right? Because I believe if you're in a marriage and you're going to start a business, you have to have 100% support from your spouse and your entire family, or you're going to have additional struggles on top of the struggles you're going to have. That's leaving corporate America. There's comfort in corporate America. There's medical insurance, there's benefits, there's vacation time, there's sick time.
Yeah.
There's all of these things. What are some of the things that they need to be mentally prepared for when they leave corporate America and start their first business?
Yeah.
As a 40-year-old.
Right. A couple things that will make that transition more likely to succeed and more comfortable. The first thing that I did that really helped a lot is I lowered by a lot my expectations of lifestyle. All it did was create a longer runway for me. I was likely to be successful anyways because I was good at the other things I'd done in life. And I was being judicial about what I chose, but I still reduced my expenses by a lot. Just knowing that if I'd given myself in my head a year or two to turn my first profit, by changing the way my lifestyle, was draining expenses from my capital, I could extend that runway by 3, 4, 5 years, et cetera. And it took all the pressure off and it let me focus on the business instead of capital. So that's the first thing. I would say the second thing is to the lower the cost of entry, the lower the hurdle to entry in the business allows you to build the side hustle for much longer before you have to make the leap. So for instance, if you're going to open up a brand new laundromat and you're going to build a building and buy all the machines, that's a couple $1 million investment, right? It's a very hard way to do that without jumping all in, because you have to build and architects and city planners and finance and all that stuff. So maybe maybe choose laundromats, because laundromats have a high success rate, and do your research so that you have a high, inclination that it will survive, right? But if you are going to do an online retail sales, you're designing pocketbooks that you think are beautiful and interesting and unique, there's absolutely no reason why you can't put 3 or 4 hours a week into that for a couple months, and then 6 to 8 hours a week, and then test your results.
Okay. So, but there's the other problem there, right? And you are in, Beachview coaching. That's a saturated market. Business coaching is a highly saturated market because the barrier to entry is variable, right? You can go to different through different programs and different systems.
The barrier to entry is zero, in my opinion. I hear you saying that there's lots of variability because people do it lots of ways, but the barrier to entry required to be a coach online is zero. Right. And so you want to start with that, just knowing that even if you're a person who invests heavily before you jump, like I'm a person that I had lots of training coming into it, right? But I didn't decide to stop and go get that training and then be a coach, right? And I think people coming in with those tools to stop and spend $100,000 and then be a coach is a little irresponsible. I coach people to one toe in the water. And I realize that every entrepreneur book you read in the world tells you to jump without a parachute. I realize that I hear it all over again. But I think this is an example of one of those spaces where 1,000 people get into the market and 998 of them fail. And you need to be smart about that. You need to see those statistics and say, okay, why? Why is there a high degree of failure? And is it all skill? Because maybe it's a little bit of luck. And if it's a little bit of random, then it's a little easier to take the foot off the gas and say, look, maybe this is not all about how brilliant I am, or maybe this is not about all the skills that I've invested. Maybe there's a little bit of luck factor that I need to protect myself against.
Right. I get a chuckle out of the 22-year-old kid that took an online business coaching program and now wants to be my business coach or my life coach. Right.
Right.
I get a pretty good chuckle out of that guy. But it happens. And I get hit up by them pretty nonstop, right? So if somebody's out there, and I'll put you on the hot seat now, and they're looking for a coach, a business coach, specifically business. I don't know that I understand the life coach piece, right? I guess I've got my psychiatrist. I guess that's my life coach.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that an entrepreneur should be looking for if they're going to bring on a business coach?
If they're going to bring on a business coach, I would say that much of the advice you need to start a business is free. And just start with that. And so, if a 22-year-old driving a Countach, sends you a message, even if they're successful, you have to ask yourself the question, what do they have that you require? What do they have that actually helps you? And the fact of the matter is they haven't had that much life experience yet, right? And so they probably got most of their advice online for free. Why don't you try that? Try that first. I say come into a problem that you are having, a difficulty solving, and then contemplate hiring a coach. There's no formula for being a business coach online. There's no formula for being a mindset or a life coach. There are lots of programs out there, but most of those programs are not successful. Most of the people who coach those programs are not successful. And so I'm not saying that those are bad people. It's no judgment there. I'm just saying that you have to take that 1,000 applicant subset into mind when you make the decision. Some of this is just statistics. Hey, most people who buy laundromats are successful. Great, that's a good place to start. So I can make some risk decisions and strategy decisions about that because I have that data. Most coaches, right, are not financially successful online. They might be very satisfied with the work, but they're not financially successful. That's a fact. So just go into it armed. That's all. It doesn't make them bad coaches. Maybe some of them are super useful and maybe some of them are super satisfied. But for you, what do you need? Most of the tools available for that are free. So go get them, use them, practice them, go in with one toe and then go in with one leg. And when you come up to your first problem, then find somebody, but find somebody that has some kind of history of solving that problem.
Yeah, I think, I've got mentors and coaches all over the place, right? And it's important for me to have people that I can lean on when I get into uncharted territories for myself, right?
Yeah.
When I took out my first $4.6 million SBA loan,
wow,
right? I brought in mentors for that. I'm like, hey, I need a CFO. I need somebody that's done this stuff before, right? This is a big deal. I've never been down this path before. If I'm going to buy a company, right, I'm making big decisions. Sometimes I need a mentor or a coach to help me navigate through there. And I also have a coach that just keeps my ass in check, right? Like just that's a little bit, just so that, once a month we get together and say, hey, how are we doing? Are we on pace? And all these things. And that's helpful, right? I don't know that she's giving me any specific advice on how to grow or things like that, but it's having another person to hold you accountable because we don't have a boss. Like our boss is our clients and our employees, right? Well, they're not going to be honest with us. Right.
Yeah.
And a coach
their incentives are not aligned with yours, sadly. It's just human nature, right? So I have some contrarian advice in this department. Not everyone will give this type of advice, but my clients seem to benefit from it. And that is that if you have something to lose, that is a much bigger reason to hire a coach, a much better reason to hire a coach than if you have some potential to gain. There are lots of folks that have made money with crypto, right? As far as we know. But it's all potential gain from you. And so the question is, how much information is out there? How likely is it that you'll be successful with it, which is low in crypto, right? Very few people have been successful with it. So take the free information, use it. If you have some success, then reinvest. That's a good kind of return on investment on a strategy. Whereas when you're in a position with a lot to lose, right, it's just way easier to calculate your return on investment. And for me, I guide my clients to really steer towards that side of the investment program. When you have a lot to lose, seriously consider hiring a mentor that can help you mitigate the risk. And when you have something to gain, try the free tools first.
I love that. Look at the free tools first. And if you think that you need a little bit more help, go there. These coaches, and they're buying great marketing programs, right? They make you think that they've got some secret that you don't know.
Yeah, there's no secret.
No,
there's no secret.
It's hard work.
Be careful not to fall into a Ponzi scheme too, right? Coaching is one of those things. If you can get into it without a license, then there's a flood of entrance into the market. And you just have to, the calculation I'm asking you to make is how likely is it that this person has a program that will help you to succeed? And there are programs that are very good that are likely to help you to succeed. The chance of you finding one in your first couple months of business is just low. That's all.
Right. Well, and in the first couple months of business, I mean, that's block and tackle world, right? I mean, that is just all hustle, in my opinion, right? I've bootstrapped most of my companies, and I love doing it that way, right?
Yeah.
And nobody can tell you if you're bootstrapping and you're creating something new. No coach in the world can tell you what you're doing because nobody knows yet what's going on. Yeah, sometimes you don't even know what you're creating. Right, you're just creating something, and hope that it works. So, very, very interesting. All right, Todd. If somebody wanted to work with you and your team, how would they get in touch with you?
We have a website called beachview.biz. B like Bravo, beachview.biz, B-I-Z. And what we do there is we highlight. We're running 4 businesses now. And what we do is we highlight those businesses and we highlight the types of folks that we help best. So that before you call us even, that we're someone that can help you through a practical situation you're in. And I think that's the best way to start a relationship with a coach. Wonderful. And we'll throw those links in the bottom so that if you're
you're watching the show or listening, you can click it. It'll be in the show notes. So fantastic. Todd, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with today?
No, being an entrepreneur is a journey, I think. It's a set of skills that you can learn. It's not magic in a bottle. It's not how you dress. It's not coming from the right family or the right part of the world. It's a set of skills that anyone can learn. And I think that if you have a passion for that, many, many, many people can succeed. So one step at a time, go for it.
Absolutely. And if you do it and you love doing what you do, you'll be an impactful part of thousands of people's lives. And that's super rewarding. So
it sure is.
Thank you so much for your time today, Todd. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken. Nice talking to you.
Have a great day. Thanks for watching today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Get to work.